Hello, I'm Sauté, and welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is a map of the world, and this is something almost everyone can agree on is legally correct. However, despite that, and despite it being true on a continent level, this is where most Europeans agree the borders legally and officially are. If you just ask a slightly different question, you get a much more fun answer, because this map has been going around recently showing what percent of people agree in a country with the statement, there are parts of neighboring countries that really belong to us. And as you can see, on the low end, you get 13 or 23%, but on the high end, you end up with 60+% of people in a given country agreeing that their country really should own parts of neighboring nations, which is absolutely insane to say. I mean, you might be able to predict it for Russia, maybe, or even Ukraine, but when you start to see it for like, wow, 67% of Hungarians think that really some of their neighbors belong to them, you might think that war is on its way, and you might also think that Europeans sure are quirky for just wanting to have some of their neighbors. So let's dive into what actually people do believe on this as the first part, and then dive into, is this unique to Europe? It seems like a uniquely European phenomenon to believe that the whole world belongs to them, because admittedly that was true for a little bit, but do other countries go through the same thing? And more importantly, I think for the third part, we'll dive into what actually causes this to come about. I think it's an interesting topic, and so we'll be diving into that as the three-pronged part of today's video, as well as, of course, the most important bit, an update on the 12-in-1 Ninja, air fryer rapid cooker. It's an incredible piece of machinery, and we'll dive into a fun little update about that right after we mention that, yeah, this map clearly singles out Hungary as being the country which has the largest claim to its neighbors, and the reason behind that, to put it simply, is that Hungarians clearly are not, they're still a little upset about the Treaty of Trianon, which is the one which ended World War I, basically, where Hungary it had already been divided from the Austro-Hungarian glory days, but Hungary went from looking like all of this to giving up some slices of its countries to all of its neighbors on all of the sides. Yugoslavia gained a little bit, which was nice, and Slovakia, Czechoslovakia gained a bit, which is nice, and you can see Romania even gained a little bit, because basically Hungary was a very multi-ethnic country at the time, and so it was kind of decided that they could be single ethnic by having only the parts of their nation which were majority Hungarian. This is something which is very much forced on them, because they lost the Great War of the time, and it's something that happened to lots of countries. However, it's something which clearly you might know from the fact that Hungarian politics, there's basically one thing that everyone knows, and it's that they have these very strong anti, European views to some extent, because they do believe on some level that, yeah, this was one of the great empires, and now it is just a fairly small country in the midst of Europe, something which would make you feel quite resentful if you were Hungarian and you learned about all of this from the past. And so indeed, if you look at the next slowest down country, you can see like, okay, it's Greece. You can obviously imagine there's a similar thing there. You might not have expected it for Bulgaria and Turkey, who are the next highest, which is like 58%. That is more than half of people in Bulgaria who say, yeah, there are parts of our neighboring nations that really belong to us. If that is a surprise to you, then fun fact, this is what Bulgaria has looked like in its various past. So just to, we'll use World War I and World War II to keep things simple. Bear in mind that technically during the craziest days of its empire, they controlled a lot of what is nowadays Ukraine and much further into Europe, including, by the way, Hungary. But you can see that, like, yeah, Bulgaria has gone through lots of territorial evolutions, and that is something which I think separates the countries on this map that have like some number of people who agree with their neighbors belonging to us, and the countries where it's like the majority or a sizable minority, a plurality, would like to believe that. And that is basically how recently were the borders fiddled with, because ultimately, even though maybe Bulgaria shouldn't own this territory by the ethnic states that were decided at the time, ultimately that was a foreign meddling. Bulgaria would not have willingly gave it up. It's just, maybe some wars happened in the region, and then after those wars, there was obviously, which by the way, this is just kind of insane to really look at. The fact that certain countries in the world, but especially in Eastern Europe, really do have so many forms they could take. Someone could have, if they'd have been a slightly more successful negotiator, they could have had a differently sized country. If they were slightly less successful at negotiating, they would have had a different shaped borders. Their borders are not the result of a grand movement over hundreds or thousands of years, as can be argued elsewhere in Europe, but instead it's like, yeah, some man drew some lines on a table and they happened to get unlucky. This is the complaint that people are always levying at the Middle East, where some guys just drew a line, which by the way brings us nicely into our next point here, because obviously Turkey is on the same level. Basically the same thing happened to them. They lost World War I. This was one of the biggest empires ever. The Ottomans fell. There is an argument to be made. I didn't know that was only an argument to be made. I thought it was like fairly solid that the Ottomans are actually the Romans' direct direct successor because the Western Romans fell, but the Eastern Romans never quite did. But regardless of whether you think they're the Romans or not, this empire existed for such a long time. It is one of the great empires of Europe, and after World War I rather, they didn't exist through World War II, Turkey got really carved up to the point where the modern Turkish state is still, under the Ottoman control and eventually became what we now accept as part of that. But the amount of territory they lost was insane, which is kind of what led to these arbitrary lines. If you're Turkish, that probably hurts especially bad, right? Like, yeah, they took our lands and then they just made weird lines through them so they could decide, yep, French, English, just arbitrarily through the whole thing. It is insane, but this is indeed what happened after World War I. And so if you are from this place, you might think, yeah, they weren't us, but they were part of our empire. Famously, if you've ever been to, one of the most interesting things to me, Istanbul is the biggest European city, if you count the non-European bits, which is interesting to me. But if you count the non-European bits of Istanbul, it's the biggest city. It's literally called European side, which is fun. But it's really interesting to me because the amount of different cultures that made their way here, this was the big hub city for their empire. In the same way that people come from London from all over the British Empire, which means all around the world, all around the Middle East, you see various bits of their culture in Istanbul. And so if you're Turkish and you're exposed to all these different cultures that are kind of like yours but not, you start to feel like, yeah, I feel as though some people at some point decided to draw our borders wrong, which basically comes down to, and that's also kind of what you can see in Eastern Europe, Poland's modern day existence is mostly old German territory because old Poland belongs to Belarus now, and the same is kind of true for Belarus with Russia. The amount of meddling in the borders of Europe is really, really wild, and so you can see the more that happened and the more recently that happened kind of leads to this happening. Also, by the way, although it's kind of crazy to say that, yeah, despite that, 37% of Spanish people believe that some parts of neighboring countries are theirs, French people at 33%, even British people, like 23% feels like either there's some people really, really crazy that they think they should own Ireland still, which, just saying it would be convenient on some level if nothing else. I'm not saying they don't really belong to us, but if they wanted to join, it's one of the few places I'd go on then. But the same is true for Dutch. Like, are they mad that they don't own Belgium still? There's just so many weird questions this map raises, and rather than going into each of them individually, because it's so fun as a thing, like, Germans wanting to own countries outside parts of their neighboring countries is one of the big things we've spent so long trying to prevent, and still 3 in 10 of them believe it, which is just absolutely fascinating. But yeah, basically what it all comes down to is at some point their borders were meddled with by some foreign power, and so, is this a lesson against meddling with borders because the people still agree with it? Well, I mean, obviously yes, but the thing is, you might think this is a uniquely European problem. The last 2 world wars both happened in Europe, and so, wow, therefore, it's just Europe that has a weird problem with borders. But when you look at the rest of the world, you can see basically this same problem playing out there. For example, China is the biggest country in Asia, and they don't have any border disputes with anyone, famously. Well, I mean, actually, sorry, if we look at the fun list of current disputes, it's a whole Wikipedia page with a list of resolved and unsettled ones, but just the disputes that currently are ongoing, excluding the ones they've resolved with Russia, Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, etc., you can see, like, wow, it's the majority of their continent they disagree with, and this isn't just a feeling disagreement. This isn't just Chinese people feeling like they, should control Taiwan or parts of India. This is them legally claiming that they do. This is a step further. It is one thing for Hungary to be upset about the Treaty of Trianon and to be like, yeah, it would be nice if one day we could retake our bits of Croatia. Now that it's not even part of Yugoslavia, this eastern part of Croatia really looks like it's holding down the western part. Who wants a country with that awkward cut in the middle? Maybe we could just take everything, east of here. Maybe Hungarians say that to themselves every night before they go to sleep, but they don't go to Croatia and say, yeah, that's ours, just so you know. We'll be claiming that, and internationally, I hope you don't try and believe that Zagreb is your capital because it's our second city, damn it. That doesn't happen because Europe is at least friendly about it, but on other continents, it gets a little bit less friendly. I believe you could probably make some argument that there are some, when you look at the United States even, the US and Canada have very good relations, but there has always been this historic thing that's probably only gone away in the last 100 years or so, where the United States, just a lot of people at high levels of government were kind of just expecting at some point Canada would be an easy invasion target. They were, famously during the Revolutionary War, they sent some people up to Quebec, and also they kind of just assumed, like, yeah, these are the other North American colonies, at some point they'll join up. And so you would probably get, especially in the border states where they have to cross the border and through their lifetime it's gotten harder, they're like, know, maybe we should just take Canada, damn it, and maybe the same in reverse. A lot of Canadians spend so much time in the United States, they're like, you know, maybe the United States should just give us these close by states right here. Would be a lot easier to travel between, you know, like New York and you know, Toronto if we just made it all Canada. Just saying, it's a much friendlier feeling here than over here or over here. But it is something that happens all around the world, and so believing it's a uniquely European phenomenon is just something we see because the countries are so close together and historically have evolved so damn much. But anyway, the important thing to say here is, why does this happen? I think the simplest thing that can explain this map is basically the tales that we tell ourselves, not just via the, you know, like, oh yeah, I like to tell my grandkids about how great Bulgaria once was. You know, I like to tell I like to tell random children on the street that Hungary used to be bigger, and the only reason we're not is because we lost World War I, or rather, those meddlers who wanted to stop us doing what we were doing, caused us to lose World War I, or whatever the grand conspiracy may be. But the interesting thing about it is, like, yeah, this is a very strong truth that is kind of told presumably in the, you know, like, one of the interesting parts of this is kind of history. History is the reason that people look at this stuff. If you ever looked at the history of your country and you realized that, yeah, actually most of Poland's land belonged to Germany, like, not 80 years ago. So much of the, you know, like, famously Gdansk, Danzig is one of the biggest, most famous German cities that is now a Polish city. That is a weird thing to do to your identity, but then also, you know, as a German, you could feel that way, but as a Polish person, you could realize that there are so many former Polish places that are now just existing inside of other countries, and that would make you feel some unease. Like if in my lifetime, suddenly, I don't know, the England split in two, or the United Kingdom split in two, and Scotland not only leaves the UK, but by force they take everything down from Manchester, I'd be like, yeah, that was like a part of my nation at one point. I don't like that they came down here with guns in our parliament and, you know, threatened us until we gave it up. That feels like not okay, right? You'd feel like something was stolen, even though maybe the North, maybe Manchester's happier with Scotland's rule than with London's. Who knows for sure, right? There are these, it's a ridiculous hypothetical, but this is a ridiculous hypothetical that comes up all the time. If you go back into history far enough, if they taught really, really strongly in British history, not just about the, you know, like the various waves of people that came here. This is something everyone knows, like we had basically many waves of invasion that formed the people of the UK, but instead of teaching that, they taught us specifically many times about how, yeah, the UK and France went to war a bunch, and, you know, I'm just saying, at one point the Kingdom of England owned all of this land. Also, during the, like, 1500s, the UK was at war with France enough, or rather, the England was at war with France enough times that they're like, yeah, Normandy was basically a permanent British base. I might be like, yeah, I think I want Normandy back. I think it's messed up that when you look around this area with Dieppe, and when you look around at Calais, that these are places that are not parts of England. I mean, you look at Calais, you just have to respell it a little bit, make some new monuments, make sure they fix the French people problem that they've got going on there. There's just so many, if you've ever been. It's a whole struggle. But if they just did those things, then all of a sudden I think we could have Calais back, and it would be a great place for the invasion of the rest of France. Oh no, look at me, look what I've done. But yeah, this is... I think the amount you teach in history, the things you teach in history are kind of always going to be national strong points. You are trying to build a nation, and one of the best ways to build a nation is not saying, yes, we are very weak, very tiny people, but instead being like, we are the strongest. You know, we owned an empire that had the whole world. I never learned, and it was shockingly late in life that I learned the UK at one point, you know, like founded the United States, basically, right? Like that was a British colony that turned into a superpower. And if I'd have learned that really early on, I might have some beliefs like, well, you know, at some point those guys will come back, right? At some point we're gonna take back the Eastern 13 states. Like, it's only fair. They you know, they can keep the interest that they've made. You know, they turned the 13 states via great investments into 50, but we can have our 13 back now, hopefully, right, at some point. That might be a real belief if that's something that I ever learn. The things that you learn in history and the things that are parts of your national myth and your national identity really start to become things that you will believe. If the British people were taught exclusively about how Northern Ireland was kind of made up from, you know, like if Northern Ireland was a made-up place that was just kind of carved out from the rest of Ireland during their independence, people might be more in favour of Irish unification. And if British people specifically learn about how, yeah, the people of Northern Ireland were Scottish people who came over who specifically want to be part of the UK, you can, just with knowledge, you can kind of shape people's minds. And I don't think that we are using history classes to reinforce territorial beliefs. although, you know, maybe in some countries that does happen. But what I think instead happens is we tell national mythos to keep ourselves, you know, going as places, and sometimes those national beliefs lead us to maybe have to invade somewhere else. If Russians spend all day, every day believing that, yeah, there is this part of Ukraine which they're, you know, like really we just gave to them as a gift, and, you know, like then they went and started being independent and start, you know, spitting in our faces, we're just gonna take our gift back. Whereas Ukraine might learn that, yes, this is an integral part of Ukraine, it's literally attached to our landmass, not Russia, and they came in here and invaded. That will shape your perception so much, and in general, people are more likely to agree, people are more likely to believe things that are good for their team and bad for the other team, and less likely to agree with things that are bad for their team and good for the other one, which is just a problem we all have as a world. I think what would be good is if we taught worldwide history as the standard rather than nationwide history. It would be great to learn, you know, I was shocked when I learned the size of the UK relative to the world. I was like, really? With that little island? It's crazy. It blew my mind how tiny it was. If we taught everything about it in history in terms of relativity, and we try to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna learn a little bit about these guys, these guys, these guys, these guys. I shouldn't have learned, I shouldn't have heard the word Prussians for the first time and gone, wow, there's a second Russia existing in Europe. I shouldn't have learned about, you know, the Ottomans and been like, wow, they're the successors to the Roman Empire, except actually maybe the Holy Roman Empire was the successor to the Roman Empire, except maybe the Russian Empire was the successor to the Roman Empire. They got these fun little things here. To me, it should be a lot easier for these sorts of things. But then ultimately we get to the point of like, there's too much history. How do you learn any of it? I'd like to know if you have a fun solution. But I think, yeah, in general, teaching nationalist mythoses probably is a bit dangerous in many parts of the world. In Europe, it hasn't led to many wars, but it does lead to a lot of international disagreements, which could probably all be avoided if we explained why things changed a bit better. Or maybe, okay, even better idea here, maybe we could stop redrawing the borders of countries based on how good or bad boys they were. That's my other idea. By the way, speaking of good boys and bad boys, I recently I uploaded a video talking about I like to be very transparent about how much YouTube earns, just because I'm curious about how things work. Maybe you're curious about how YouTube works, so I uploaded a whole video about that. You might have seen it. It's this one right here. Why did you like this thumbnail too, by the way? But yeah, so as I uploaded this video right here, a lot of people left some interesting comments, and the most common one was, wow, Toycat, I can't believe that I can get myself a Ninja SF301 Speedy Rapid Cooker and Air Fryer 6-quart capacity 12-1 functions for just $129.99. Many people saying they were buying several, you know, for their friends and family. However, despite this, I went and I looked on my Amazon report recently, and a lot of people have ordered items. 7 people did, so just want to say thank you. But something weird that Amazon does is it tells you what people have bought using your affiliate link. And obviously I was expecting to see a whole ton of Ninja SF301 12-in-1 air fryers in, of course, sea salt gray. By the way, it does one-touch meals in 15 minutes. You press one button and you get a whole meal that looks like this. Look, it literally can do 2 different functions at the same time. Air fry the top, steam the vegetable. What more do you need? But yeah, the interesting thing is, rather than buying those as I was expecting, people have been buying USB Bluetooth adapters for their PC. For the love of Europe, my favorite, please, you know, it's just, I'm looking through it. There's a few things on the main channel, the eShop cards I've been promoting, but you can see that in general, I said people should buy this 12-in-1 air fryer, and people instead have been buying Pokemon Scarlet and Violet posters. We've been seeing USB-C extension cables. A Scrub Daddy? Who bought a Scrub Daddy? Does that count as a kitchen item? Because if so, I'm proud of you. But if not, I'm very not proud of you. The point here is to say that, yeah, a lot of people, I really do recommend, I cannot recommend higher, anything but the Ninja SF301 Speedy Rapid Cooker and Air Fryer 6-quart capacity 12-1 functions to steam, bake, roast, sear, saute, slow cook, sous vide, and more. Because seriously, if you've ever looked at this thing, it's crazy. There's a little thing in there, and it does everything. You get one appliance on your kitchen top, and you don't need your oven ever again. You don't need, you know, a steamer. You don't need pots and pans. It all goes in one magic box. Mine was black, I'll be honest, but I like sea salt gray just as much. And yeah, 15-minute meals, 4 times 6-quart capacity. Wait, feed up to 4 with a 6-quart capacity. I don't know what 6 quarts is, but it sounds like a lot, huh? I guess 6 quarts. A quart is logically a quarter. What is a quarter of what, though? It's not a liter, so it's a gallon? Is that 1.5 gallons? Did I work that out? Sounds like a lot, huh? What are you gonna do with a gallon and a half of stuff? You can have air fry healthy meals with up to 75% less fat. I'm just saying, if you value your time and you value your health, the only thing you need is a Ninja SF301 Speedy Rapid Cooker, and make sure you get it before 2021 so I get a higher bonus when you do so. Okay, this is apparently a new segment on the channel. Toy Cat sells air fryers, but I hope you enjoyed this. I will also update you about what people have been purchasing, because apparently USB cables and Yankee candles are as best as we're doing so far. Hopefully you can do better next time. But yeah, for now, thank you for all of the purchases using my Amazon affiliate link. No matter what you buy, it seems to help out the channel. Even when it's Yankee candles, scrub daddies, and casual leather jeans. So thank you, and I guess I hope you have a bad day, because I'll see you next time. Bye.